Good morning, everyone. Brent Simon here. So I thought I'd jump on live, do some Q&A. If you've got questions, I've got answers, as they say. Happy to take questions on any subject you like. No particular sort of topic. I'm sure the new Trump administration will be on the minds of some. And I'd encourage you to watch the interview I did with Jesse Bless last weekend, where he gave his perspective on the sort of things that could change. And I thought he had, he's obviously got an extremely good idea of what can and can't be done, what is and isn't possible. So, by all means, do go and watch that. And I think you'll have many of your questions will be answered just from that. Okay. One question that does come up is this sort of question: what's the future of the DV program under Trump? A lot of people will refer back to comments that Trump made in DV in 2017, early in his first term as president, where he referred to the DV lottery program and said he wanted to remove it. I think he would like to remove it, but as discussed in the last couple of videos, he can't just wave a magic wand and make it go away. There needs to be some sort of change in the law to stop the program. What he is more likely to do is make processing of various types of immigration more difficult, and that could impact the DV lottery. I don't think he'll particularly be focused on DV lottery as such. Now, as Jesse pointed out, it is possible that there could be some law that is absolutely sort of distinct and targeted directly at DV lottery, but why? Although DV lottery is a big deal to us, it's not a big deal in the overall sort of immigration landscape. And so it may be used as a sacrificial pawn, meaning it might be a bargaining chip. It might be something that somebody says, look, I want this in this area of immigration, and you want to get rid of DV lottery. So, we'll trade those things. We'll get rid of DV lottery so that we can have this. It might come to that sort of deal, but there's not really a good reason to get rid of DV lottery, to be honest with you. Okay. So the visa bulletin is for December and January. 12K Europe is current for January. Yes, there was a pretty good jump in the visa bulletin numbers. Of course, that came after 3 months of static numbers. So a lot of people have immediately jumped to the conclusion, probably wrongly, that there will now be a sort of a rapid increase in the numbers. I don't think there will be. But, it doesn't really matter. It's not really important how the numbers change month to month. What's typically more important is where they're going to end up at the end. And what I would say is that under the Trump administration, if he does make immigration more difficult, if he does introduce certain bans and that sort of thing, it will have a chilling effect on immigration, including DV lottery, and that becomes good news for higher case numbers. The visa bulletin is more likely to go to a higher case number at the end, with certain people being banned. Now, of course, that's not a good thing. It's not a good thing if you're the banned people, but if you're the high case number people in an unbanned country, it could become sort of interesting for you. Okay. Hi, boss. I have a child born in the US while we're on tourist visa. Is this grounds for disqualification? It can be, actually. There is a part of law that says you should not have had that child in the USA. This is birth tourism. This was a deliberate act on your part in order to try and get a US citizen child. And under the Trump administration, that sort of thing is going to become more of a concern. Okay, there's nothing you can do about it now, but in time that might be a bigger problem for you. It's all speculation. I can't say for 100% certainty that that is going to be a problem. I don't think I can say that at all with 100% certainty. But I can tell you there is already existing law that would make it a problem for you. And, it's just a matter of whether that policy or whether policy is implemented that says if you did something like that previously, then you could have a problem in further immigrant applications. It remains to be seen. We'll have to wait and see. Hope you're good. Great. Have a quick question. Can I see if my photo is approved before May 3rd for the DV 2026? No, you can't. In fact, you will only see one of two messages in May. You'll see you are not selected, which is what 99% of people will see, or you'll see that you're selected. If you were selected, then your photo went through the photo screening process, digitally at least. And so it passed the various sort of levels of tests they use in the first screening. That's not to say you can't have a problem with your photo, but it's possible to get selected and then have a problem later. But you'll have to wait and see whether that even allows you through the first level of screening. But if it does, don't worry about the photo too much. As long as you've taken the photo of yourself and not somebody else, for example, that would be a problem. As long as you haven't confused the photos and that sort of thing. It's pretty hard to get disqualified through the photo, frankly. But anyway, no, there's no way you can check it. In fact, you will never ever be able to get back to your original DV lottery entry. You can't see what you typed into the form, unless you kept the information, and unless you kept it, nobody else can access it for you. Okay. Hello, Simon. I hope you are doing great. Why in the last VB Algeria is on the exception, 22,000? I explain this every time I publish information about the visa bulletin. In the lower half, behind under the picture, I explain some things about the visa bulletin, including what the accept means. Now, let me just sort of briefly explain. When you have a large number of selectees that are going to a single embassy, and that group of selectees are all concentrated in the lower number ranges, then it makes sense for them to accept that country to spread out work over the 12 months. And so with Algeria and a couple of other countries in Africa, that's the case, right? You won't have case numbers to the highest case number. You have a lot of selectees, and most Algerians go to their interview in Algeria. And so to spread the work out over the year, they slow it down a little bit. Now, right now, it's only 500 numbers behind the main visa bulletin for Africa, so it really isn't a big deal. But it could easily, be cut off earlier, earlier in the number later on, right? We'll have to see how processing goes. Okay. I wrote the birthplace wrong on primary entry. Will I be disqualified? Can it be corrected on the DS260? Will you be disqualified only if the birthplace you wrote is completely wrong, like it's the wrong country, and that country is in another region. It's very, very hard to get disqualified over writing the wrong information. So typically what people do is they'll say, let me just use England as an example. They'll say they were born in London when actually they were born in Luton, which is a very distant suburb of London, you could say. There's even an airport called the London Luton Airport, which is bullshit. So putting Luton, which is 30 miles north of London, is a mistake. But is it going to get you disqualified? No, because both London and Luton are both in the country of United Kingdom. They're both in England. It's no big deal. It's not a problem. If, on the other hand, you said you were born in London when actually you were born in Sydney, Australia, then you're in the wrong you're in the wrong region, and that can be a big problem. Okay. Right. Good evening, sir. Will my case number be reached this year? I'm from Africa with case number 64488. You don't need to give me the precise number. And when you give a number, you should always give the year and the region, right? So you say 2025 AF 64XXX, meaning 64,000, right? 64,000 range. That's probably a pretty good number. You don't tell me the country you're associated with, but it's probably okay. I think Africa has a tendency to go higher than mathematically it should. And so, for example, in DV 2024, I calculated the chances of of Africa going current, and mathematically it absolutely shouldn't have gone current, but they made it current. And part of that is that they're trying to fill the quota for Africa first and foremost. And when they underfill Africa, it tends to be beneficial to Asia and Europe and the other regions, because regions are allowed to sort of use the unused quota from other regions. There is a formula for that. But they want Africa to fill its quota, which is about 24,000, nearly 25,000. So they will push hard, including raising the visa bulletin number above what it should be in order to try and get to the quota. Okay, that will happen. You'll probably go current. Are you safe? I don't know. That's a totally different question. I had hepatitis B 12 years ago, was active at that time. Now hepatitis B is inactive. Does that pose any problems? I don't think so. Obviously, it will be up to the physician during your medical exam, right? That's a case number correctly stated. Don't have to give me the precise number, but you're not really saying anything. You're not asking anything. Are you asking if your case number is okay? It probably is. But we do need to see some 2NLs for Cameroon. Right now, we're not sure that we're seeing any 2NLs. And so, that's kind of disconcerting. But we'll only really see the 2NL activity for sure on the 1st of January of next year. Okay. They sent 2NLs to only 12K. I kind of get frustrated when I hear these sort of things, because you don't have all the information, right? So you make statements that are based on a confirmation bias. You have a position in your head, and you see information that confirms that position in your head, and you can't open your mind to think that anything else could be going on. And so it's confirmation bias. You're not really thinking, do I know every single person who has a case number over 12,000? Am I absolutely sure they've only sent 2NLs to that number? Of course you don't know, right? So you're just guessing. So that's one thing. We'll have to see what goes on. But the first 3 months of every year are not the busiest 3 months of every year. Okay, so relax. There's plenty of time. Felix says, "G'day. I know which region you're from. If I submit DS260 now, is it still okay for EU26 number in DV25? Quite a huge travel history for me and my wife. Thanks." It's okay. You'll be processed in plenty of time. You're not super duper late or anything like that. I would suggest, though, that unless you're trying to delay your interview, you should submit your DS260 like now, right? Don't delay it any further unless you are trying to delay your interview. And why would someone do that? Well, in some cases where they haven't met the education requirement, for example, but they know they're going to meet that education requirement in July or August of next year, someone might say, okay, I'm going to delay submission of the DS260 until about April, and that means I won't get interviewed until July or August of next year. That's a reasonable strategy for someone to take if they've got reason to delay their interview. But it's a bit of a gamble, right? You can understand that might be a gamble. And so, in general, don't do that unless you've got a good reason to do that. When does the DV lottery selection begin? Immediately after closure of applications or sometime after the closure of applications? We don't know the precise date, but I know that the draw takes place in about December. And that's the initial draw. Now, the initial draw, remember, is, let's say they've got 10 million entries. They jumble all those entries up and they number them from 1 to 10 million in each region. So Africa will have a case number 1, EU will have a case number 1, Asia will have a case number 1, and they'll all go for as many entries as they got. The only region that gets close to having 10 million entries would be Africa. And these days, it's probably not that likely they'll have that many entries. But you could see, let's say, 5, 6, 7 million entries quite easily in Africa. So there will be numbers from 1 to 7 million, let's say, right? Then they'll pick the top numbers, let's say the first 100,000 case numbers, and they will go through those 100,000 case numbers, disqualifying cases as they go through on the basis of photos not meeting the requirements, the technical requirements. That process is done automatically by a system that is designed to detect anomalies with the photos. That system also uses facial recognition software to see if there's any other duplicates in any of the other entries in the 7 million or a known offender from previous years. They'll use data techniques to look at all of the data that you've entered to see if there's connections, see if you've entered previously. Previously, you said you're married. This time you say you're unmarried. Why is that? All of those things will be happening, and they will be disqualifying cases before May. It'll be so many cases disqualified that we could see 60 or 70% of the cases being disqualified from the first 100,000 case numbers. In fact, we probably will. That's pretty much what's happened in DV 2025. We have 55,000 selectees who are on about 30,000 cases, but we've got 100 case numbers up to 100,000, just over 100,000. That means 70% of the cases were disqualified in Africa. Okay, think about that. It's the same in each region, possibly not as bad as Africa, but people are struggling to take a decent photo in Africa. That's all I'll say. I'm working on that. I'll just hint at that. I'm working on that problem. Hello, sir. Kenyan ambassador resigned this week, and will that affect scheduling in Nairobi embassy? No. It's very normal during an administration change for the ambassadors to resign. It's a very normal thing. All of them will do it, essentially. Some of them will be immediately reappointed. Others will be replaced. But part of what they should do is they should say they serve at their government's, at their president's liking. And so they resign. They tender their resignation as part of the normal process and may be rehired. Whether they're hired or not, I don't think you actually believe that the ambassador is sitting there going through DS-260s and approving cases or anything, right? The ambassador is a figurehead, a leader, not a doer of the job. The people who are doing the job in Nairobi embassy are the same people. I would like to show data about how some of these embassies have performed over the last few years and what's happened. Nairobi embassy, for example, has pretty much doubled its capacity in the last year to 2 years from where it was at in the height of immigration back in the sort of 2017, 2018 days. We have data that shows that, that is a policy change, but it's also a staffing change, right? Those staff, so maybe that policy was changed by the existing ambassador, but those staff have been hired and they're in place, and they don't just suddenly disappear because the ambassador moves on, right? So, we don't need to worry about the ambassador changing, affecting the way that the embassy processes cases, right? So don't panic about every single thing you see, please. Elvis, how are you doing? DV winner 2025. What happens if your host is different from your sponsor? No problem at all. There's no requirement that they should be one of the same person. Any idea if Dakar embassy are sending to an else? We don't have data at the moment. So whilst there are WhatsApp groups and Telegram channels and localized where people are swapping information, that information is pretty good, but it depends on the size of the group. So, for example, the information coming out of Turkey groups tends to be quite high quality information. It's well organized and the groups are very large. And so I find that sort of information trustworthy. But if somebody tells me that they're in some country in Africa or wherever else, and they've got a group of 15 people and there's 3,000 cases, 3,000 selectees in that country, then I tend to ignore what those people are saying, because, if it's only 15 cases or 50 cases out of a possible 2,000 cases, it's not representative enough. It's too easily skewed. So the size of the group and the method for collecting information, is important to establish the credibility of that information. And without knowing all of that, I tend to ignore that data, because it's not data, it's just rumor. So I ignore all the rumor, and I'll wait for the actual data on January 1, which we'll get from the SEAC system, thanks to Zarthisius and other people who are scraping data. So that's what I'm going to wait for. I'm not going to make lots of, predictions, etc., based on data we don't have. Okay. Samanda Charles says, been waiting for your live. Want to hear your say about the January bulletin. Yeah, I think I've already covered it. It jumped pretty nicely. I was pleased to see that, but I don't necessarily see one particular month's movement as being the whole story for the year. It's a slowly developing story. It has more to do with it than just where they're trying to get to. It's all sorts of stuff that goes into it. How many people are processed in the DS260? How is DS260 processing going? Which I think is slow, by the way. What changes have been made to KCC to cause that slow processing of DS260s? What's going on at the embassies? Are they scheduling as many cases as they should do, and so on? And so there's a lot of factors that affect how the visa bulletin is calculated. And so therefore, at this time of the year, when we have no information, it's not smart to try and guess what one visa bulletin means. Okay. When the results out as a high school student at grade 12, May 2025, is about to get his diploma in June 25, could I just, if I filled the DS260 immediately on May 3rd, or should I just wait? God, I have dyslexia, and when I read something as badly worded as this, I'm struggle to understand what the hell you're meaning here. So your case is something, Khalid, a little bit like what I just described. I think you're not going to qualify, high school student, grade 12, right? Okay, if you're in high school, you're grade 12, and you need to qualify, you need to finish off that year, then you should not attend an interview before you've qualified, right? Because you will be disqualified because you haven't met the requirements. So if that means that you might have to delay submission of your DS260. If you've already submitted it, then you might have to delay your interview another way, almost by missing it and contacting the embassy to say, hey, I'm going to have that interview in June, right? So these are good questions to ask before you do things, Khalid, rather than doing the thing like submitting a DS260 and then asking, right? So anyway, there you go. And Boris, hey, hi Brett, just say hi and give you the likes. Thank you. I'm DV24 winner, currently in New York. Yes, indeed. We've spoken before, I believe. Asare says, hello, sir. Please, what's happening in Freedom Embassy? You mean Freetown? 2NLs have not been dropping. Yeah, I've heard the rumor, but I don't know that as a fact. I do think that's probably true. I don't know why it's happening. So, hello, boss. I saw your post on the January bulletin. Just want to know if DV winner with case number AF11000 will get interview in January or expected his or her 2NL this month. Okay, so when do you get a 2NL? You need three things in order to get the 2NL, in order to be scheduled, right? The first thing is your case number has to be current. Your case number is current. It went current in the first visa bulletin, so you've been current for quite some time. The second thing you need is your DS260 has to have been processed. I don't know whether your DS260 is processed or not. There will have been some people that submitted in May where their case has not been processed yet. That's because not all cases take the same time to be processed. There are people who submitted in, let's say, July and August probably, who have already been processed, right? And again, it's not necessarily to do with the date of submission. It's to do with how long your particular case takes to process for whatever reason. And so, two things that you need so far for scheduling. So you need to be current, and your DS-260 needs to be processed. The other thing which confuses people is your embassy has to have had the capacity necessary to not have a backlog, right? Now, what do I mean by that? Let's take the case of Accra Embassy. It looks pretty likely, based on rumor, that Accra are not scheduling many cases at all. They might be scheduling no cases, or they might be scheduling 10 or 20 cases a month. If that happens and the visa bulletin moves, then they build up a backlog of cases. And that means that even if your embassy, increases its capacity a little bit, it may be too little to clear out the backlog from previous months. So it can take quite a bit of time to get to your case number in that scenario. And, so depending on which embassy you're at, it could mean that you won't get a 2NL for January. And, we really need to see the data on January the 1st to know what's going to be happening, right? Until then, we can only guess. Although if you do want to guess, it would help if you would talk about which embassy you're associated to, so that, I could answer that question more carefully. Okay. Okay. Hi, Simon. I just got my 2NL date for 8th of January. I kind of expected it for later. I asked the embassy to get a later date in February due to medical stuff. Will this affect my chances a lot? Case number 7,500 in the EU. It's so funny. We got so many people who are desperate to get their 2NL, and then you get your 2NL and you're like, oh, it's too early. Okay, so what can you do? If you have, I generally would say this to you. If you have some sort of complication that means you need to delay, one thing is you can delay the medical interview itself, right? So you can attend the interview, but not have the medical interview. You could do that. You can ask the embassy to postpone the interview. It's slightly risky. I don't like doing that unless you absolutely have to, but you can do that, right? There are various things that you can do, and you should be able to sort of figure it out between you and the embassy, or the embassy and the physician. But just be transparent with the embassy, right? Tell them what's going on. If you've got a medical condition that you're trying to clear up and you need time to do that or whatever, or just whatever it might be, contact them and see if they'll postpone the interview for you. That might be the best way, okay? Eddie says, I'm DV winner AF5K. I'm doing for interview next month. Good. I had my wife, but she doesn't have high school paperwork. She doesn't need it. You as the winner need high school paperwork, right? But the derivative doesn't need to prove any education level at all. Okay, no problem. In one of pre-election interviews, Trump mentioned giving green cards to all foreign graduates from US universities. What do you think about this? Trump says a lot of stupid shit. Sometimes he says things that could be good, right? I don't really pay attention to what he says, because the ratio of stupid shit to clever things is like this: lots of stupid shit and very little clever things, right? So I just tend to turn all of it off in my head, because honestly, it's the stupidest shit you could ever imagine, generally speaking. Why would I listen to such a buffoon, right? So, I don't know. To Odros. Hey, Simon, 2025 winner, 30K from Ethiopia. Yeah, oh, actually, no, let me just think about this for a moment. Was planning to transfer my case to Kenya, but Addis seems to be doing good this year. Has scheduled 15K for January. What do you advise me, dear? Yeah, that's what I was just about to I was about to say, you need to get the hell out of Ethiopia. And then I realized in the back of my mind, the rumor that I've heard, that you're confirming, if you like, that you've heard, right? That they have scheduled cases up to, I've heard 14.5K or something, let's say 15K. If it's confirmed that they have done that, then that in itself will be a much better performance than last year. And I looked at the data the other day, and I have seen that Ethiopia started to do better a few months before the end of the last year, right? And so a few months before September, basically. And so it may mean that they are over the difficulties that they had that were stopping them actually scheduling cases, and maybe they'll be okay from now. I really hope so. It would be nice to see Addis Ababa back in the game, frankly. They used to be a good embassy. And so it would be nice to see them sort of doing well. Let me show you something that would actually, I think it's worthwhile you looking at. Let me present this information. This is going to be interesting for everyone. So not just Addis, but I'll show you how you can actually see some data here that confirms what I just said. If you go to Zarthisius' site, he's got these 3 links at the top, which you should pay attention to. The IV issuances by post is a particularly interesting one. And if you type in any of the posts, oh, come on, Addis, right, Addis Ababa, there you go. If you type in any of those, you get the sort of historical context for this embassy from 2017 up to September 24. Now, this is official data. This is issuance data. Issuance data, funnily enough, isn't as accurate as our SEAC data that we get. There's a strange thing where they miscount the data, but regardless of that, you can see some representative data here. It sort of gives you an idea of the flows. Now, the last time the DV lottery was what I call normal was 2018. DV 2018 was the last good year. There were problems in DV 2019. DV 2020 had obviously COVID. COVID effects continued into 21 and to an extent into 22. Then DV 22 and 23 had the burst of activity later in the year, so they weren't usual. DV 24 was, a pretty well-run year, shall we say, with some impacts in some countries. Now, if we look back and we said, okay, in 2018 and 2017, the highest number of visas, all visas that Addis processed and issued, was about 1,000 cases, right? Of which about 40% were DV cases. Immediate relatives was about 38%, and family sponsored about 21%, right? So that's around about June of 2017. 2018 was pretty good as well. Cases up to about sort of 700 or 800. And if we look at the 2023 time period, we can see that they never really reached their potential. And this is 23 really didn't have an excuse like COVID, right, for the processing time. 22, kind of did, etc. So you have to think about the timeline here and think what was going on at that time. But DV 23 finished in September 23. And so in that time period, you can see that they didn't do great. And overall, their max capacity there, or their max issuance number, was back here in sort of August of 22. And in that timeline, they did, about 800 cases, but they still did quite a lot of immediate relative cases compared to DV, right? Whereas before, they were doing more DV cases than immediate relative and family sponsored. Now that's sort of changed around. And so you can see months like November 22, where they did almost nothing for DV, but they did nearly 300 immediate relatives and 200 family sponsored, right? So you can see that what happened is they tended to prioritize the red color and yellow color here, which is family sponsored and immediate relatives. And they've prioritized those over DV for a while. Now their general capacity seems to have returned, and Addis, just over the last few months, has started to show signs that they are coping with more general activity level than they ever have before, ever, right? That suggests that they've solved whatever staffing problems they've had. They're still doing a lot of immediate relative cases, and they're doing a lot of family-sponsored cases. Look at those numbers, right? And but in that same timeline, they were able to start issuing some DV cases, which is good. And I'm hopeful that this new higher capacity for the embassy in general for immigrant visas will mean that, yes, we will start to see better activity at Addis. I hope that's the case. I would like to see that confirmed by the data, and we'll have true data for DV on January 1st. But even looking at this historical data here, we can begin to see the pattern developing here, where that looks a lot healthier in overall size than even back to the good years, and certainly better than the bad years. And so this backlog of work that would have occurred for immediate relative and family based, maybe that's beginning to sort of be under control, and they're also increasing the capacity. So fingers crossed, Addis might turn around, might become a good place to process again. But you can look at any embassy this way, and you can see some interesting information. If you want to see, for example, Nairobi, I predicted was going to become, a great center of processing, and you can see why I was thinking that way. I made that prediction back in about January of last year. Yeah, January of last year, I think. So maybe it was January of this year. I'm a bit lost with it, but anyway, I started to see the increased numbers and the way that it had increased massively from previous good years, right? If 2017 and 2018 were good years, and Nairobi used to issue about 500 cases, you can see there about 500 cases, of which the majority was DV. It's not a big surprise now to see them do a lot more cases, like nearly 1,500 in a month, and a big chunk of cases there, but still do a lot of DV cases, which is tremendous to see. So Nairobi has become a very much more productive embassy in general, a little bit earlier than Addis did, and is clearly not having to spend too much time on family-sponsored and immediate relative cases. They are able to spend most of their time on DV cases because for whatever reason, they didn't build up the backlog. They were able to keep going. If you see here, they were able to keep going with the IR cases, immediate relative, and apparently just don't get the sort of numbers. So that bodes well for Nairobi to go forward. They've obviously transitioned into a high volume center. If you look at this from an annual basis, you'll sort of see that a little bit better. I've just summarized the data into a single year. So in fiscal year 24, they did here 10,000 cases, which is about double what they had ever done in any other year, right? They doubled their capacity. That's pretty significant. And if we look back at Addis, it won't have fed through yet, which is why you can see it was a good year for general processing, but they have done a lot of IR and a lot of family-sponsored cases, and their DV cases don't look particularly impressive compared to this. But they have increased their capacity in general, right? So it tells a story here. You need to spend a little bit of time. I was actually planning to do a video on this topic, which I've probably just now ruined because I've given this information in this video. But it begins to explain what I'm trying to say anyway. I think we'll see better performance. I'm hoping we'll see better performance from Addis, and I've just explained why. All right, so stay where you are, I think, is the bottom line, and certainly, watch the numbers carefully on January 1. But we'll see. I think it might be getting better. So I'm going to stop complaining about Addis for now. Malang says, my physician said my medical was signed off, but I didn't take the Hep B vaccine. What's your advice? Oh, okay. So I think you've already asked me this. I've had a very, very similar question. If your medical was signed off, then just relax. Stop going on about a vaccine you weren't required to take, even though your friend was required to take it. I've already answered you, I believe, Malang, on this exact question. But stop going on about it, right? You're fine. Like, if you've got a signed off medical, you're fine, right? Okay. Hi, Brit Simon. My case number EU 12,000. Is it safe to unlock DS260 on now and next month? I mean, you may ask to unlock your case and they may say, oh, it's 12,000 something. Okay. So yeah, you could unlock it now, but do you need to? I read something the other day from someone who changed. What did they change? It was two totally silly thing. Oh, it was someone who had unlocked their case to update the address of where they work. Maybe they'd changed their job. You don't need to do that. And they added in LinkedIn to their social media profile. You don't need to do that either, really. So that person then got themselves worried because they had unlocked the case and made these changes. And I would have said, why are you unlocking the case for that anyway? I'm not someone who believes that unlocking delays cases. It generally doesn't. But why would you unlock for stupid reasons? Don't do that, right? So if you've got married or you've had a kid, then yeah, absolutely, you need to unlock. You're required to do so. If you got divorced, you are required to do so. But if you notice you made a spelling mistake on a school you attended 30 years ago, nobody gives a damn. Don't unlock for that, right? If you change your job, don't unlock for that. If you go on holiday to Cyprus or something, no need to unlock for that, right? There are things that you don't have to update in your form because at the time when you submitted that form, the travel history was correct, the job history was correct, and so on. So unless there is something very important about what you want to add to that form that changes your security background check, for example, you've just got married and so now you want this other adult person to be background checked. Yes, you absolutely have to unlock for that because your marital status changed and you want to add your new spouse, right? If you've had a baby, you want to unlock for that. You don't want to delay that at all. You want to add that baby, right? If you got divorced, you are required to unlock because your marital status has changed, and that's very significant, right? So, there are things that you are required to do changes or you should do changes for. And then there's a bunch of uninteresting crap that you don't need to. The only gray area is where you made significant mistakes in the first filing of your DS260. Like, for example, you forgot to enter any social media, right? Now, if you missed off one social media, but you put 5 or 6 others, don't worry about unlocking for that. But if you have 5 or 6 social media accounts and you don't list any of them, then it looks like you're trying to hide them, right? And so you definitely want to unlock and change that because it looks like you are trying to be deceptive and you don't want to give that impression. So, there are things that you will unlock for and there's things that you don't unlock for, right? And it should be common sense, but I get a lot of questions on it. So I guess, common sense isn't that common these days. Okay. What happens if you win and the photo is like a passport photo, but is professional? I mean, Elvis, I don't know what you're saying there. I have no idea what you're trying to ask there. Hello, Britt. I'm a DV24 winner from Seattle, and thank you for the amazing help. Love it. Seattle, rainy place. Why did you go there? But it is. The West Coast has now become a very important place for America because of the insanity going on in most of the country until you get to the other coast, northeast coast. I should say, because of the political situation. And the political situation, although people don't really like me going on about politics, etc., it does make a difference. Over the last week or so, I've managed to be very relaxed and calm and happy, etc., because partly because I live in California. So I've got a 16-year-old daughter. If I were living in Texas or Alabama or somewhere like that, I would be worried at this point, right? Because of who my daughter is, who I want her to be, what rights I want her to have, and that sort of thing. I would be worried, right? But if you think about who I am, I'm an old white guy, wealthy, frankly, compared to a lot of people, and I live in California. Those things mean that Trump can't touch me. Oh, I'm also a US citizen. Trump can't touch me. He can't change my life in any negative way. And so what I wanted for this country in voting against Trump was mainly about my thoughts and for other people. some of whom voted for Trump. Well, they voted for the guy they wanted, they got what they wanted, and now they will suffer the consequences of what they wanted. That won't affect me at all. I don't give a damn, right? And you, as new immigrants, can now choose where you want to live. And for Menaku there, you chose to be in Seattle, which is in a blue state. You'll be absolutely fine, right? So you as immigrants are going to have to make smart choices over the next 4 years. If you go and move to Alabama, don't be surprised that they are now more racist than they were a couple of years ago, and certainly even a couple of weeks ago. Don't be surprised about that. That's what's happened, and you should be paying attention, right? So there you go. Any idea how London Embassy performs? Precious says normally pretty good. I don't have data to say what they are doing, but I will show you. Let me show you the data for London. Right. So let me just show you this. This is, I'll move me. Where should I go? Over there. Yeah, this is the data for London. You can see that it consistently is, pretty good. If I look at the monthly data, they do a lot of activity. It's just consistently, well run. It's British. What can I say? But in terms of DV, of course, it doesn't have, up until now, or up until DV25, it hasn't had a local sort of number of cases, but it does handle cases for other parts of the world, and it's always done that, right? You can see that green color in the chart here. It's always done that, and it does it pretty well. Okay, so if you're at London, you normally don't have a problem. Okay, Epic Gamer. On the list of requirements when entering the US, it says that your X-rays are required. Is that the case? I'm concerned because I was not given copies after attending my medicals. Sometimes the package has a DV in there, a DVD or whatever, or a CD with the X-rays. But don't worry about it. Almost 100% of the time, when I hear about people entering the US with their brown packets, etc., sometimes they were carrying a separate package with X-rays, or a CD or something like that with X-rays. And I can't remember the last time I heard some case where they said, yeah, they took the X-rays from me. The Border Patrol officers are not interested in the X-rays. I don't know why the embassies give them to you. They just apparently don't want to store them. But they're not really necessary as part of the process for entering the country. You've got a medical report that's in your brown package, you'll be fine. Okay. Hey, Britt, can you guess which month can be past the visa bulletin 20,000 in Asia? I don't know. A lot of that is going to depend on what happens with Trump. And no, I'm not going to try and predict it. Hey, Britt Simon, my girlfriend and I got a child on November 5th. Congratulations. I happened to fill in the DV form on the 6th of October, and if I'm selected for the DV lottery, can I be able to petition for them to come later? What you must do, David, is even though you described this person as your girlfriend, she's not your spouse, so you can't include her on the DV lottery process, right? Unless you go and marry. If you marry, you can include your girlfriend, right? You can include her. You've had a kid with her, you may as well just face facts. You're pretty much connected to this woman. So if I were you, I would actually go and get married and include her that way. But regardless of whether you do that or not, you've had a kid. So you need to unlock your DS-260 and include the child in your DS-260 as a minimum. Now, let's say you plan to not take the kid and the spouse. First of all, why not? Second of all, just understand that if you plan to get married and try and take them later, that's going to be a very long, complicated, and expensive process. So you have an option right now to get married and include them in the process right now. Why wouldn't you do that? Right? It just makes perfect sense. Like, why wouldn't you do that? Particularly if your case number is not current yet. I mean, you already delayed your DS-260 quite a long time for submission. Why not just unlock it, and add the kid as a minimum, but also get married and then add, DS-260s for the spouse and the child. Why not? And if you say, well, I'm not sure I love her, then don't lie down with her and have a baby with her. Like, I'm sorry to sound like a grumpy old man, but don't have kids with people you don't, love. It's a big deal having a kid, right? So, just keep it in your trousers until you're actually committed. But once you've got a kid, you are committed. So anyway, regardless. I emailed KCC about my case, and they told me that my case is ready for interview, but since I heard nothing from Yaoundé embassy, what can be the problem? I don't know that Yaoundé is scheduling many cases. I don't know. I don't have the data. And so that could be the problem. So you will get a letter from KCC saying you're current for interview processing, if your case number is current and if your DS-260 is processed. But you still might not get a 2NL because your embassy doesn't have capacity to accommodate you and the people that are in front of you in the queue. Okay? So keep your fingers crossed. Hopefully that will get fixed soon. Omar says, will Trump idea be a problem for incoming winner or those who have already have DV documents? Because I have 10 years green card, but I want to travel and come back. Can Trump ban me from coming back? No, not really. As a green card holder, you're pretty safe. There is, you've had the 10-year green card for 10 years. You should really consider citizenship because that would give you the best protection. Being a green card holder is still a probationary period. So, for example, if you commit some crime, it's much easier to deport someone who is a green card holder than a US citizen. Okay, so and it is still possible to deport a US citizen that took citizenship through naturalization. There's a process called denaturalization. And the Trump admin actually created a department in the first presidency term, a department for denaturalization. And as a threat and as a bit of publicity stunt, Stephen Miller recently said that we can all expect that denaturalization department to be turbocharged. That was his wording, meaning that he's threatening that more people will be deported and denaturalized through that process. But they can't just denaturalize people just randomly. You have to have committed some sort of crime in getting that naturalization process, which I remind people that if, for example, you leave a child off your original DV lottery entry, you leave a spouse off, you leave a child off, something like that, and you think you can fix that later, you can't fix that later because you may reveal the existence of that child over some period of time, or it may become revealed. And even if you've become a citizen when that is revealed, years later, they will look at that and say, hang on a minute, you didn't list that child. Why is that child not included on your DV case? Why are you now saying you've got the child that you didn't ever reveal? You shouldn't have got the DV win. Therefore, we're denaturalizing you, and it goes all the way back to your original line. That's possible. I'm not saying it will happen as a guaranteed thing, but it is certainly possible, right? So, it's probably not a great thing to be sitting out there with that sort of, problem sitting over your head. But back to your question, if you don't have those sort of problems, as a green card holder, you're relatively safe. As a citizen, you would be even safer, okay? Hello, sir. Do I need to email KCC for further information on where my interview will take place, or KCC will direct interview me on where I was chosen for your DS-260? They generally base the embassy on your current address and partly on the embassy you selected in the drop-down list. If you selected an embassy that doesn't match where you live, you should really write to email KCC saying, I live in Paris, but I chose to ask for my interview to happen in Sydney, Australia, because I expect to be there next year when my number becomes current, right? So my address hasn't changed yet, but I do expect to be there because I'm doing an education for 12 months starting on January 1, right? You can give them an email like that, and then they would respect the choice you made on your original DS-260 application. If they don't have an email like that on file, or if they just make a mistake. Sometimes they just ignore the choice on the DS260 and they schedule according to your current address. Okay, we're going to take another couple of minutes. I've got to leave and I've got to have a COVID jab in a few minutes. So topping up COVID and flu, which according to Kennedy means that I'm going to be tracked by Bill Gates or something. I'd rather be tracked by Bill Gates than Matt Gates, put it like that. Moon Leung. Hi, Simon. I'm 2021 winner, now living in North Carolina. Still care about DV. Thank you for all you do. Good luck for everyone. Thank you, Moon. That's lovely for you to drop by. Thank you. Waleed, in your opinion, what will the effect of Trump administration on employee-based visa, EB2, NIW? I hope the influence of Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk will increase, will reduce barriers for some of those employment-based routes, but some of that may come at the cost of DV lottery. If they have to change a law, that's the sort of thing they could change. They could say, we would much rather have employment-based green cards being issued faster than DV lottery. That's a perfectly possible thing. So we'll have to wait and see what they do. But this is not going to be a subtle administration. They're not going to be a smart administration, right? And I fully expect Trump to fall out with a bunch of people over the coming months. Because he's just such a bad, awful person and bad manager and bad selector. I mean, some of the cabinet picks that he's made are the stupidest cabinet picks you could ever imagine, and it's impossible to imagine he won't fall out with people over the coming months. He did in the first administration. I think that just comedy show will continue. So we'll see. Why do you figure DV couldn't be repealed while Trump has a majority in the Congress, House, and Senate, not to mention the Supreme Court currently having mostly Republican judges? Because even with a majority, a narrow majority is not enough to pass immigration reform. And the senators and even the House will not all just get in line behind Trump if he comes up with some stupid law or whatever. There has to be support. And it really needs to be bipartisan support, even when there is a simple majority. It would only be if they had a massive majority in the House, in Congress, etc., that they could really force through, massive change without much concern. But if they manage to craft some sort of bill where they offer Democrats something that the Dems want, and on the other hand they sacrifice DV lottery, for the furtherance of that, then that's possible. We might see some sort of change like that. But it takes deal making. And despite the bullshit that Trump comes out with, he's not a good deal maker. He alienates people, which is a horrible way to make deals. And so Trump will alienate friends and enemies. And that will make it very difficult for lawmakers to come to terms on and agree on things, right? Where there is broad disagreement, it's going to be very difficult for them to pass new laws, even if those laws are good laws, right? So expect to see him do things by executive order, but not very much by lawmaking. Okay. Let's see. What does current mean? It means that your number is less than the number for your region or your country on the visa bulletin. So if Africa is current up to 22,500 and your number is 24,000, then your number is not current yet. If your number is 22,000, then you are current, right? Unless you are from Algeria, where the number is set at 22,000. And then if your number was 21,999 or less, you would be current. But if it's 22,000 or more, then you're not current, right? That's what current means. My number is 5,600 from Sudan. Concerned that Trump will bring back the ban before my interview. Can't do anything about it, I'm afraid. You just have to wait and see whether that happens. I do think that the talk I need people to understand. When we're talking about the bans, we can't be certain that those bans will come back, right? They might come back, but we can't be certain that they will. When there's been bans in the past, it's because Trump was able to point to some crisis, right? The COVID crisis was very useful for him, but there were other crises that he was able to point to. And those are the reasons that he gave for having the bans. Without a reason, he may not be able to implement such stringent bans, right? We'll have to wait and see. But we'll see. Right, I've got 1 minute more. Do you know how many people from the UK won the lottery in the previous DV and in terms of percentage? Thanks. Great. No, they haven't published the numbers at all. I did reach out to Curtis Morrison this week and ask him to ask an official question of the government, which he's got a way of doing that through the AILA meetings, saying, did you just mess up? Or are we to take it that there were no winners from the UK? Now, I know there are winners from the UK, so I know that it's not true. I know the answer, one half of the answer, but I'm looking for them to correct their published numbers, right? So we may get an answer to that over the next month or two, but we'll have to wait and see. Okay. Okay. One more quick question. Where to find the amount of winners per country from previous years to get a general idea. Go and Google these words: DV lottery statistics. Those 3 words: DV lottery statistics. On that page, you'll find a resource that gives you the number of selectees per country, along with the number of entries per country, and the number of visas issued per country. Very good, useful information. Go and have a look at that. Okay, I'm going to have to call that a day. I'm going to go and have a jab. And but I hope everyone has a lovely day today. Hope that was useful. Please give me a thumbs up and make sure you're subscribed, please. Thank you. Bye-bye now.